governor, Gavin Newsom, because if there was ever a time we get to choose our leaders, we want to make sure it's leaders such as them. But now we need to inform them. Again, I want to reemphasize that I'm thankful that Dr. Flores was able to characterize the inequities that exist here. If we don't take the war on COVID into our neighborhoods, into our communities, we're going to lose the war on COVID, and more casualties will continue to occur. Last numbers that I saw, and I'm pretty sure the numbers increased dramatically, is 125 people dead in our region. And this is not accounting for all those that are being transported out or are seeking medical care elsewhere. It is, again, I'm very glad, and I saw this actually in the chat box, that we're in the governor's watch list. And it's important to be on that list, but it's more important to be in the governor's emergency investment list. We need to retool the nonprofits, just like we retooled car manufacturers, we retooled industry to build ventilators, to build respirators. We need to bring back those resources. We need boots on the ground, being able to reach out, the harder reach population, be able to change behaviors, being able to address the social determinants of health. If we don't address this in the entire picture, we're going to lose the war, because we're always going to be on reactive mode. We should have been on proactive mode long ago, months ago, but we need to start now. And if I can get a message out to the governor, is we need that investment now. The singular strategy of addressing our critical condition at the emergency room, it is important, it is urgent, but we now have to expand that in order to be able to address the continued increase in population, increase in cases of COVID in these neighborhoods that were well characterized by Dr. Flores. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Luis Olmedo. Do we have questions for him? Nestor? Nestor, you can ask your question from Dr. Flores if you want.
Thank you, Pilar. Thank you. And Dr. Flores, yeah, thank you for your presentation. I mean, it was quite clear the way that you detailed the severity of the situation. And of course, I mean, in the Imperial County with 127 deaths and taking into account the number of people residing there, I mean, it's quite serious. We have Imperial County in the governor's watch list. There's also a stay-at-home order. But don't you think, and what's your answer to all those who at this point are saying it's imperative that we should come up with a lockdown? It's real lockdown. So following some models from other countries, that we come up with this lockdown and also strict law enforcement. Of course, I mean, except for those essential workers that you were mentioning before that are key to our economic structure. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. And I'm sorry, were you asking the same question that you put in the chat box? Okay, so I think the issue is that it's not enough to just have a stay-at-home order. There has to be a safety net, and we see this in the Scandinavian countries. Sweden opened up their economy. They never had a stay-at-home order, and they've had 40% more deaths per capita than the US. And their Scandinavian neighbors had stay-at-home orders, much lower death rates. But the difference is they have a safety net and we don't. And so my report was just really emphasizing the importance of having that safety net, because a stay-at-home order would not be as effective if it's surging in those communities that are required to work, where we see COVID already surging.
Thank you so much, Dr. Flores. Going back to Luis Olmedo. Luis, you have spoken about the endemic issues that made Imperial County, as you told me the other day, the perfect breeding ground for this pandemic. Have you seen in the leadership of the county or the cities in the county any willingness to address those? And what are you asking for? And then we'll move on to Luis Flores, who also can give us more details.
Look, I think it's important to recognize our entire valley is disadvantaged. Whenever we think about disadvantage, we can't cherry pick, what those things that we want to characterize or those conditions that we want to pick and address. this entire valley has been underfunded. Our cities have been underfunded. Our county have been underfunded. And then when we have a pandemic of this scale, it is expected that our health department is going to step up and fix all problems. And that's just not the case. We have been dealing with historic endemics such as the Salton Sea, which is this country's climate crisis. We are not able to solve that, and it has been nearly 2 decades where we had an opportunity to fix it. And the federal government has not stepped up. The state government now with Gavin Newsom is stepping up, but they're in a deficit. They have a long way to go before they put us on a positive. We have the New River, which is well known as the most polluted river, carries viruses that have been eradicated and is the perfect conditions for these types of viruses like COVID to exist and to be the ground zero for the pandemic. A lot of times we think, well, this pandemic started on the other side of the world. The conditions that exist here, this country is responsible for creating these conditions. We could have been the hotspot, the source where COVID could have started. And so, again, the federal government has been able to deal with the cross-border pollution, the fact that it is very convenient for us to have this economy where the state benefits, our county benefits, the federal government benefits. But again, we're cherry picking what are those things we want to address. And I think the largest issues, we're already 85% Latinos. We keep talking about the numbers that were already shared, that consistently Latinos numbers kept increasing while some of the other ones were a little bit slowing down or stabilizing. Latinos and communities of color and in the conditions where these inequities exist is where COVID was thriving. Again, if we don't address these inequities, we're not going to win the war on COVID. We have to have the political will. We have to have the investment, and this is not a time for political divisions. We really need a legislature at the state level. We need a governor, and we need a president, and we need a federal administration to step up and address these issues that have been documented for decades upon decades. Is it because we're Latino? Is it because we're low income? What is it? There is no excuse. And now, all these years where the can has been kicked down the road, we ran out of road. And now this responsibility feels like it's in the hands of Governor Newsom. It's quite unfair because where is the federal government stepping up in this situation? We need both the federal government and the state to invest and to pay back all those years of deep cuts and inequities that we're now facing, these social determinants of health, because it doesn't matter if we eradicate. And I believe one of the doctors here locally had mentioned that we're soon may be an endemic. What does that mean? We're going from pandemic to endemic. That even if we eradicate COVID in this entire country, COVID is still going to exist here. And we could be the reason that COVID spreads back in these ongoing waves throughout the country, throughout the state.
Thank you, Luis. We're going to move on to Luis Flores, activist with the Imperial Valley Equity and Justice Coalition. Luis, you were part of a group that wrote a letter and pushed back on the county when they were trying to move on to phase 2, to get some exceptions, to reopen the county. Please tell us what happened and how the community organized.
Yeah, thank you for the invitation. So just a bit of background. We're a group of about 12 community sort of rooted organizers, and we have a sort of a group of around 2,000 sort of community members that we are in contact with that emerged out of this petition. So I'll give a brief sort of overview of sort of what that was and what we're focusing in now. On June 3rd, the Imperial Valley Board of Supervisors appealed to Governor Newsom that this entire state move ahead to stage 2B, which would be a departure from the county by county movement toward reopening that Imperial County would be very far away from qualifying for. So we understood this to be as an ask for an exemption from county metrics, on account of unique conditions of the borderland. So we started a petition, a group of concerned friends, that quickly turned into a pretty large list of folks who gave us testimonies, and we sort of wrote a rebuttal to the governor. We wrote press releases and were successful at getting the media attention. And a few weeks and later, we think in part from these efforts, but also because of the media attention and because of just how severe the crisis was getting. Already in June 3rd, when the county sent this, we were at the top of the charts for the state, #1 on both deaths and infections. We've remained at that position, but the metrics are just worse. The governor sort of, I think, recognizing these things, asked not only sort of denying that request from the board, but sort of a request that they move back to something like stay at home. Since then, sort of, we think a lot of the things we were advocating for, we've made strides on. There's been a focus on resources as opposed to sort of the date of reopening. We're sort of still concerned about the lack of accountability that's built into the county response. All the language is in terms of strongly encouraging a series of measures with no sort of mechanisms for accountability. But we're turning now to working with other coalitions like the Comité Cívico, the Imperial Valley Community Health Coalition, and others to push it for an equity focus on sort of where we go now. So I'll say really briefly some major takeaway, and then some of the specific things we're sort of pushing for now. So some things that we sort of, I think, are pushing for is first this sort of false choice, or an artificial choice between sort of economic stability and public health, right? And I think Professor Flores' research is sort of speaking to this. This is an artificial choice because with the proper and accessible economic supports and safety nets, workers and small business owners don't have to make these choices about sort of going home if they're sick or not feeling well, fearing getting tested because they may jeopardize their economic stability, or small businesses feeling like they have to expose themselves in order to sort of keep their business, right? This is an artificial choice. And the county sort of was initially sort of making this argument, and we've sort of pushed back on it. The second thing is that we're pushing back at what I think is kind of a border exceptionalism, the sense that the problems of Imperial County are so exceptional, they're so particularistic that they sort of are must be, you know, that they either require different metrics or are not part of broader trends. And what we're pushing for, I think, is rather than treating the Imperial County as exceptional, that it's simply a very dramatic version of inequalities that are common in immigrant communities, low-income, working-class communities across the country. So there is a transnational twist to sort of to how dramatic our crisis is, and we know that workers of color across the country have to sort of traverse long distances in risky public transit to work in low wage and sort of precarious jobs. That's happening in the county across an international frontier, but it is a labor problem, right? It's not this exceptional problem that we can't sort of measure and sort of understand in the same way that we understand racial and socioeconomic injustices in other places. So we're trying to say we're a dramatic but not exceptional version of things that are going on elsewhere. So the same kinds of tools with more resources should